On today's episode of the Yaesu The Radio Show podcast, we are going to be talking about why Yaesu System Fusion. That's right, we're going to be delving into a little bit of understanding what Yaesu System Fusion is from a technical standpoint and why it was chosen as that mode. That's for today, Friday, September 12th, on the Yaesu The Radio Show podcast. And welcome, everybody, to the Yaesu The Radio Show podcast. I'm your host, John Crook. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you once again to all the people that tune in on a regular basis to our podcast, as well as the video portion on our YouTube channel, Yaesu USA Official. And for those that may not be aware of it, while we are streaming on PODBEAN for our podcast host provider, we are now branched out to all the different types of podcast services out there. So if you enjoy, let's say, Apple Podcast or all the other different ones that are out there, make sure to search up Yaesu or Yaesu USA to find out new podcast episodes when they were released on our usual Friday timeline on there. But for today's episode, we are going to be talking about why Yaesu System Fusion. So not so much as like Yaesu System Fusion as like it's a digital voice technology, here's what it can do, but kind of starting to get down into a little bit of that nitty gritty of why we chose C4FM and FDMA as that digital voice technology, which is a really, really good question, and which is one that tends to come up a lot when people are talking about Yaesu System Fusion. So we're going to answer that question today on the Yaesu The Radio Show podcast. How that, prior to diving into this, we are going to go ahead and talk a little bit about our new Yaesu.com website. That's right, the Yaesu.com website has been redesigned, organized better for you. As you see, our Yaesu website offers amateur, aviation, and marine radios for you. That's right, amateur, aviation, marine radios. Those three categories is what Yaesu excels in. If you are trying to find stuff about your amateur radio, click on the amateur radio picture. From there, you'll be taken to the amateur radio section, which will allow you to kind of sort, we can say, by classification, whether it be HF transceivers and amplifiers, VHF, UHF mobiles, or VHF, UHF handhelds, and our section on there which covers our legacy product. If there's a great Yaesu radio that has recently ended production or maybe has been out of production for a few years and you want to see what information is available on it on the Yaesu website, or maybe files or firmware, whatever the case may be, click on amateur radio, then scroll down to click on legacy products, and then select via the link the model of radio that you have. That is all on the Yaesu.com website, Yaesu Radio for Professionals. Check it out at www.yaesu.com. Alrighty, well, thank you for tuning into this episode, and this is going to kind of be a fun episode, I feel, because, once again, we get a lot of questions of, like, why did we choose this digital voice? Why didn't we go with a different type of digital voice? Why didn't we use a different type of digital voice technology? And the answer, once again, comes into the pure simple fact of is that when we were looking at a digital voice technology, as you've heard me say on numerous episodes, we were looking for something that met three characteristics. That first and foremost characteristic was going to go ahead and be the aspect of high quality digital voice. If that digital voice that you were using is not of the highest quality, does not have clarity, does not sound good, it causes you to strain, to stress, to kind of listen to it, you're not going to go ahead and want to use it. So that's why we stressed high quality digital voice. The next thing that we wanted to do is make sure our digital voice technology was going to be easy to use. We did not want to go and require people to have to dig down, to break out a computer to program it. We needed to be able to be modified, changed, whatever on the front of that radio. If you want to operate FM, make it easy to go to FM. If you want to operate digital, make it easy to go to digital and not have to be bogged down with some of the things that other people have or must do when using other digital voice modes. And the final part that we've always talked about has been the flexibility and the versatility of the Yaesu System Fusion product line. We want it to be easy. We don't want it to have to require the internet to be able to use our digital voice technology. We don't want to have to require you to add all these additions or have it tied in certain ways to networks or whatever. We want it to be simple and easy to do. When we came up with those three main points that we use, we said, what is going to be the best technology mode out there? And hands down, C4FM and FDMA continually came up in all those answers that are out there. And that is why Yaesu System Fusion uses C4FM and FDMA. Now, before we dive into some of the technical stuff we're going to talk about here in today's episode, the biggest question I wanted to go ahead and answer is why is it called Yaesu System Fusion? Why is that? Where did that name come from, John? And that came from the concept of why we use C4FM and FDMA and how we wanted the ecosystem to evolve. Unlike some other digital modes, you don't need to automatically be forced into digital. With some modes out there, you have to admit, and you do know that it's like, whoop, today, boom, we're going to go to this digital mode, and at Monday at 8 a.m., everything's going digital. There's going to be no analog back. We realize that digital is not for everybody. Or there's going to be times where digital will suit the needs of a mode of operation, and there's going to be times where analog is going to be needed as a mode of operation. And therefore, that's where Yaesu System Fusion comes, because with our digital voice technology, you are able to easily fuse together the two different types of systems that you might be using. That is why our WiresX technology does transcoding for you. That is why our infrastructure equipment has the ability to transcode at that level. You can take our DR2X repeater, go in analog and come out analog, or go in analog and come out digital, or go in analog or digital and come out either just analog or come out just digital. That type of understanding, flexibility, versatility, high quality digital voice and easy to use, that is why Yaesu System Fusion is called Yaesu System Fusion. That really is it and all. And I know some people will go on saying like, oh no, it's just a marketing scheme and stuff. It's really not. It really describes on how to do it. And there are many people to this day, since Fusion came out and was introduced, years ago, that say, because of the versatility and flexibility, and let's not even use that buzzword, because of what Fusion can do, how easy it is to do, and designed for amateur use, is why it is a very popular mode that a lot of people use. But with that being said, let's dive into that nitty-gritty. Let's dive into the little bit more of the technical aspects of Yaesu System Fusion, or C4FM. So we, as I said, use a C4FM. C4FM stands for Continuous 4-Frequency Modulation. That means that the C4FM technology, which is used, and I think this is an important part, is used by public safety in the U.S. as the main means of communication for a digital voice format. C4FM offers high quality voice. It has a better response to voice. It uses more it's a little bit wider in the bandwidth. It's using 12.5 kilohertz of bandwidth. But because of those features, because of those factors, it allows that high quality to come through and to have a wide range of responses for what it can do in functionality. That's what C4FM stands for. Once again, Continuous 4-Frequency Modulation. Now, we use FDMA technology. FDMA technology is Frequency Division Multiple Access. And what that means is that there's different digital voice means of how you're going to send that digital signal down the air, radio. There was, FDMA, or still is FDMA. There is TDMA, which is what other digital voice modes use. And there's CDMA, like what cellular carriers do. That's Carrier Division Multiple Access. TDMA is Time Division Multiple Access. And what the TDMA does is that it divides your frequency into time slots. Well, that's nice, and that can be problematic on there. FDMA doesn't do that. FDMA says we're going to take it, and we're looking at this frequency, and we're going to send that digital voice data stream right down the center of that frequency. That's what we're doing. So whatever frequency I've picked, it's going right down there. No need to time slots, no need to do this, no need to do this. It's just simple. That signal is going to go right down there. And that is why we chose FDMA on there, because it's easy and simple to do. You don't have to take that extra step and determine, was this person talking to me on a different time slot or talk group or whatever? No, we don't do that at all. It's simple, easy, C4FM down FDMA. Now, has C4FM and FDMA been around for a while? Yes, it's been around for a while. It's been pretty much a design complement since the mid-90s, at least, on there. Now, the next question I will say that we get asked a lot is C4FM FDMA, aka Yaesu System Fusion, compatible with P25, which is C4FM and FDMA, or compared to other digital voice modes? No, it is not compatible. It does use different frame rate, and it does use different data stream structuring. And there's a reason for that, which is we want to be able to have the high-quality digital voice technology, but we are not wanting to copy P25, is what it is, because P25 doesn't meet a standard of IDing. Remember, in the amateur world, we need to have an ID for us. So with Yaesu System Fusion and using the C4FM and FDMA technology, with our framing and our data structure, we are able to put the call sign in there. So therefore, like other digital data modes, you don't need to take a moment to stop and time an ID and everything like that on there. If you are keying up in Yaesu System Fusion, whether it be voice wide or digital narrow, or you're in digital wide mode sending handshakes or controls to something, your call sign that you program into the radio yourself is embedded in there, and then across that data stream, your call sign will show up. That meets undeniably any sort of standard that needs to be met for FCC identification purposes only. As a matter of fact, just like you would do with APRS or Packet or FT8 or other modes on there for the amateur world, you don't need to stop an ID in analog or with CW, because when you're talking, any other Yaesu System Fusion radio will see your call sign come across on there. That is a question we do get, not so much, but when Fusion first came out, or when people were using it, they were saying, well, you have to stop and identify, or I have to do this and this and this. Or better yet, the repeaters. Some people say, well, my repeater doesn't CWID when I'm using Yaesu System Fusion. My Wires X node does an ID in CW when I'm using Yaesu System Fusion. Correct, because the call sign is embedded in there. Now, if you're using other digital modes in the amateur world that do not utilize an actual ability to put in a physical alphanumeric call sign for your amateur license, then yes, you are going to have to take the time to have your repeater CWID and other means of identification in that regards. But because the call sign is embedded into that transmission, in each transmission, that's why you don't have to stop and do it like an analog voice or CWID. Furthermore, if you take a look at the Yaesu System Fusion protocol, you will actually see how the repeater, if you're using a repeater or a Wires X node, will also embed that device's call sign on there. So if I'm talking to you and I'm coming through Wires X, you will see on your radio my call sign, and then you will see it flash over to the call sign of the Wires X node you're receiving it on. So if I'm talking to you and we're using our buddy Bill's node, you'll see my call sign, you'll see Bill's call sign as the node operator, and then you're going to go ahead and be able to hear that conversation. That's what makes it so unique. That's what makes it so nice to have that ability to not have to stop ID and all those kind of things like that with analog voice or CW or any other type of means of identification purposes on there. That's all injected within that stream. Now, once again, I use the example of the HRI set, or I should say Wires X setup, whether it be an HRI 200 or a PDN setup, but the same thing on the repeater. If I'm talking to you through a repeater, not only will my call sign show up, but your radio will then also flash over to the call sign of the repeater. So therefore, each time the repeater repeats its transmission, you are actually seeing the ID of that repeater come through in that transmission. There is no way with absence of you physically entering your call sign wrong on there, there's no time or scenario where your ID that you program into the radio will not be transmitted when you are going ahead and using Yaesu System Fusion. Now, Yaesu System Fusion, as I said, uses C4FM, and C4FM is a type of FSK, and FSK is frequency shift keying. We use in the C4FM configuration, 9,600 or 9,600 baud or bits per second for transmission of the C4FM signal on the frequency. Once again, as I stated, it uses the same kind of data concept, not the structure, but the concept of P25 or APCO25. Now, with that 9,600 baud of a data rate, that's why it's wider. That's why it's about 12.5 kilohertz in bandwidth. Using digital voice over analog voice, and especially using Yaesu System Fusion with high audio characteristics, you in essence can put two frequencies, two repeaters, two operating frequencies within that same 25 kilohertz bandwidth that a normal amateur repeater would go ahead and be using. So a normal analog FM wideband repeater is going to be 25 kilohertz. Yaesu System Fusion uses half of that. So one of the advantages, of course, of always going to digital is better capacity, okay? There are audio qualities, there are other differences on there, but one of the big pushes to go to digital is to be able to do more frequency, we'll call it spectrum efficiency on there. And that's what that's what FDMA does for it on a single frequency being sent down with that C4FM technology. And people have always said and people have always asked, well, what about making it more narrowband? Can you make it more narrowband on there? Well, if you start to make it more narrowband, you're going to also run into audio fidelity, loss of audio quality, and that's not what people actually want. They want higher quality audio, so it's not a strain. And if you've listened to any other modes out there, and this is just not me, this is not people that work at Yaesu or any of those likes. I've actually had people that come up to me and said, other digital voice modes cause me to strain my hearing, to almost have audio fatigue because I'm listening and I'm listening and I'm listening. And if it's bad data, if it's bad audio, if it's too high, too low, too whatever, that's going to go ahead and cause them a lot of different kind of pains and problems when they're trying to use digital voice, which, once again, is what we do not want to have happen in this case. Now, understanding frequency spectrum usage is an important thing. There's a lot of places where repeaters are just, there's not enough frequencies. In the U.S., and this is where the show broadcasts from, we are in the 144 to 148 megahertz range and the 430 to 450 megahertz range. Well, that does seem like, especially on the UHF, like 20 megahertz of bandwidth and only 4 megahertz in VHF. Some people say there's not a lot of room on there, but using digital voice does allow for that to happen. However, before we get into the second half of the show, I want to take a moment here and talk about the great specials that we have right now being offered to you, the customer, through our authorized Yaesu dealers as our Yaesu Field Gear promotion running up until September 30th. So the remainder of this month, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but, hey, it's already September 12th, and September's going to be gone before you know it. But these specials are instant coupons right away at the manufacturer, at the dealer, straight from us, the manufacturer. You're going to be able to walk in, buy that radio right off the shelf, and the authorized, you can't stress authorized enough, Yaesu dealers are going to go ahead and give you $120 off the FT710. Doesn't matter if it's the Field or the AESS version, you're getting $120 off that radio. The FTM510D, whether it be ASP or non-ASP version, guess what? $100 off. That's a Yaesu System Fusion capable radio also. The FTM150, whether it be the ASP or the non-ASP version, we're giving you $30 off. The FT3185, 85 watts of pure VHF power. That radio is built like a brick house. With the ASP or non-ASP version, $30 off. The FT5D, our top-of-the-line Yaesu System Fusion handheld with not only capabilities of digital voice, but dual band, dual display, color screen, touch screen, GPS, APRS, the whole thing on there. We're giving you $40 off on there. And then the tried and true to entry-level FT70D, we're giving you $20 off. And the VX6R, an analog tried and true radio on there, dual band mono display, glove wearing capable. That's what I love about it so much. You can use it there. That's $30 off. And the FT60 and the VX6 is $30 off. The FT60 is $20 off. I'm Apologize if I talk back there. I'm so excited about these things because I have not seen the VX6 or the FT60 or our analog radios be out on this great special. So I can't stress enough, get over to your authorized Yaesu dealers. Hey, who is an authorized Yaesu dealer? You can go over to our website, www.yaesu.com. Check out this information that's on there, as well as find an authorized dealer on our website. Alrighty, as I said, this episode gets into a little bit more of the weeds. We're not diving down to look at like the protocol and the structure and framing. That can be very taunting to some people. But I think a good understanding of what this understanding of how it really works and how it operates the frequency, I think can help a lot of people out on there. So jumping into this graph here, if you're watching our YouTube channel, and if you're not, I'm going to explain it to you, highlights the different modes that a Yaesu System Fusion radio can do. So when you take your radio and put it into digital mode, you're going to be pushing that mode button or the DX button. Sometimes it's on some radios, it's a red letter D with a letter X by it. Other times it's going to go ahead and be the word that says mode on there, depending on which model radio that you're using. When you go from FM and go into the first mode, which is DN mode, digital narrow mode, what you're doing in this case is you're taking that 25 kilohertz bandwidth of FM wide, and we're shrinking it down to transmit into 12.5 kilohertz. And in essence, DN stands for digital narrow. Now, what that means in that digital narrow is that in that 12.5 kilohertz band space, we're kind of slicing the 12.5 kilohertz down even further, and we're using 6.25 kilohertz bandwidth for voice and 6.25 kilohertz bandwidth for data error correction. So what we're doing is not only are we simultaneously transmitting your digital voice format, but we are also going ahead and transmitting forward error correction to give you the best range, to give you the best reception, to help lower that bit error rate. But we're also putting other data on there, such as a GPS. That's why if you're using DN mode and your radio has GPS capabilities, or the other person has the radio has GPS capabilities or can enter the GPS coordinates, now that distance of how far you are away from that other user is applying right there. So once again, using that FDMA, this is the only way that's possible on there. And then using C4FM makes the audio quality stay there even at 6.25 kilohertz. Now we move over to what we call the VW mode. That VW stands for voice wide mode. And like you would assume, voice wide is it's a wide path for voice communications. In this case, instead of splitting that 12.5 down to 6.25 and 6.25, what we're doing is we're sending 12.5 kilohertz of audio only. No forward error correction, no data, no GPS coordinates, no nothing on there. We're giving that full bandwidth for digital voice audio. And then finally, we have the DW mode. Now, DW stands for data wide mode, and it is selected by the radio when you need to use DW mode. Now, examples of DW mode would be like a handshake taking place between the wires X node, handshake taking place like you're sending a picture or a text message or something like that. That is when that radio is going to switch over to data wide mode. Now, the reason it needs to go data wide mode is because of the amount of data that's being sent, and at 9600 baud, it needs a wider data path on there. Now, can you select DW mode on your own? No, you cannot. Only functions that you engage or utilize will cause the radio to switch over to DW mode. So putting data down Yaesu System Fusion, not possible. People have asked for that. People said, why don't you do it? Because we want to concentrate on high-quality digital voice. We don't want to do data. There's multiple different ways to send data and information down different data modes. No sense in us reinventing the wheel, but when it comes to our audio quality, our audio characteristics, that's where Yaesu System Fusion is going to sound. Let me take a moment here to clarify. Some radios will come with the VW mode disabled automatically. And we've had people that have gone ahead and said that. It's like, John, I don't have VW mode on my radio. Why don't I? Some of the models you do have to go in and turn on VW mode in the menu system. Doesn't mean that the radio is not capable of it. It's just mean that you need to turn it on. So keeping that in mind, that's important. And the reason I bring it up is because, like, for me, I'm a big audio guy. I love the audio characteristics on there. I like to be able to take even my HF signal and turn it in, that single sideband signal, do some audio processing through it with the Yaesu radios they have built in there, and turn it to almost sound like an AM broadcast, sound clear, crisp, concise, just amazing on there. So therefore, I like to use the VW mode. Now, with that, your radio will switch between DW and, we'll switch to DW when it needs it, but between DN and VW, so digital narrow and voice wide, it will automatically switch based on what the transmission is by the other user. So if I'm talking to Bill and we are using the DN mode, my radio will receive his digital transmissions. It will show DN. When I transmit back to him, it will be in DN mode. But now if Sally comes along and Sally wants to join in our conversation, Sally decides to use VW mode. What could happen then is that Sally will transmit to both Bill and I, and our radios in digital mode will switch from DN, digital narrow, to voice wide. We'll listen to her conversation. When we reply back to Sally, we can reply back to her in the VW mode, or we can reply back to her in the DN mode. The radio itself, through the technology, will automatically switch in digital mode between voice wide and digital narrow. So no need to be worried about that, because people have said, well, what if I don't know that they're calling in voice wide mode? Am I going to have to switch it over to VW mode and then talk to them? No, you can, but as long as you're in digital mode, you have no issues or problems. The last part we're going to talk about is, once again, kind of looking a little bit more, digging into what is capable of the Yaesu radios. Now, all Yaesu radios, because they're Yaesu System Fusion radios, are capable of doing not only analog, but all the different digital voice modes that I talked about on there. So what is going to be the best particularity of usage? Like what is going to be, and in particular, I want to know what's going to be the best for me, John. What can I use? What should I use? That is going to be, in essence, a subjective versus objective answer. It's going to be what works for you, and it's going to be what you want as audio quality. I have personally done tests with people, friends of mine that use public safety radios on a P25 network and are also hams. And I've done a test where I've had a person turn around and I've set a P25 radio and I've set a Yaesu System Fusion radio in VW mode, and I walked out and I've talked to them. And I've talked to them P25, so they heard the P25 signal, and I talked to them that they heard the voice wide signal. Did not tell them which one I was using, did not tell them which one I was doing at that time, and the people were unable to determine if it was a P25 signal or if it was a voice wide signal. Once again, this was because of the high audio characteristics, the quality, the technology that's used in there. So usage of digital narrow versus voice wide, once again, is going to be up to you. Digital wide, you have no control over. And then analog mode, you have the ability to switch back to if you need to use it. Once again, reminding people that because of using C4FM and FDMA, we are able to, as part of the Fusion protocol, able to easily switch to convert analog into digital voice, convert digital voice into analog. And that's why our infrastructure exists in the way that it does. Now, I didn't want to get too far into the weeds. I know sometimes talking about people may not understand the digital voice technology, may not understand there, like I said, you can do some more research on C4FM and FDMA online. There's a lot of great articles on it. There's a lot of great articles actually on Yaesu System Fusion on there itself, even with the data sets put out there for viewing and for reviewing on there. Because you want to get it on paper sometimes, right? You want to get it on that piece of paper to read it, to do it, that kind of thing. There are those researchers on there, and that's why I said on there, because it's there. Until then, everybody, I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. I know this is a little bit more of a technical podcast. Sometimes we like to do shows that are more technical. but I think this will help answer those questions that have been coming up lately. Stay tuned to our YouTube channel, Yaesu USA Official, for new videos as well as publishing of the podcast here in the video format. And if you are watching on YouTube and, hey, I want to listen to this podcast again, I want to listen to the audio version, head on over to our PODBEAN distributor or check for your favorite podcasting services, as we have been working to go ahead and get branched out to more and more of those services. So until then, everybody, I want everybody to take care, stay safe, and we're going to catch you on down the log.